I have to just start with a little aside here and share with you that there is so much tosh and balderdash spoken about the MFA, whether it's necessary, whether it's not. And an example of that was actually propounded by me. I was wondering about collecting information for this debate. One very celebrated and respected person said, "Oh God, yes, MFA is absolutely essential for so many things. Tell me, did you know that Andy Warhol had an MFA?" Well, I was absolutely floored. I thought, well, this is easy. I'm just going to just take this by storm. So I went asking everybody, about information, and the first thing I'd say, hey, did you know that Andy Warhol had an MFA? Well, actually, he doesn't. He didn't. I got a little bit more focused onto the informational side. I actually don't know why we're debating this subject. This is more like debating gravity or debating climate change. I mean, the MFA is there. It is something we strive for. It is a professional qualification. It aggrandizes the art institutions, the city, the country. It lends a certain amount of respectability, as in old days the academies used to. And so there is something that we have to be able to throw rotten tomatoes at. But the MFA is actually very serious, agree. And it's not easy to obtain just because it's in the arts. It's not easier than engineering or law or science. It's highly selective and competitive graduate program, especially in the top schools. In 2008, Harvard Business School said that the MFA was the MBA. Now, there are many reasons why the MFA is necessary. The contacts are many and legion.
You get 2 rebuttals.
So I don't have a degree in anything. I dropped out of college in my junior year. I felt like I was wasting my parents' money majoring in marijuana and guitar. A degree is not something I look for when I'm selecting artists for off-ramp gallery. The bottom line is always the work. I look for work that's honest, creative, original, skillfully executed, and intensely visual, because I believe we are supposed to be the visual arts. The only situation for which it's absolutely necessary to have an MFA is if you want to teach studio art at the university level. The tenured positions are few and far between, and the competition for them is fierce. Most of the people I know end up chasing adjunct jobs across several counties and/or have an unrelated day job, and there are no benefits or retirement. So I looked at the artists that I've shown at off-ramp, and 48% of them have MFAs, so there's no real clear-cut advantage or disadvantage at off-ramp for having an MFA. But I wanted to look at some other successful commercial galleries and see what their artists, whether they had MFAs or not. And I think you'll be surprised at what I found. LA Louvre, 56% MFAs. Blum & Poe, 55. Ace, 41. And Gagosian, this one really surprised me, only 34% have MFAs. So if you put all those numbers together with off-ramp in the aggregate, it's only 40% of the artists that I looked at had MFAs. Artfacts.net, which ranks over 200,000 artists using a special algorithm based on which galleries and museums they've shown at, how many times, with whom, etc., etc. I looked at their top 50 living artists, and only 11 of those 50 had MFAs. That's 22%. Typical costs for a 2-year MFA in studio art are $28,000 to $73,000. In a 3-year program, it's $41,000 to $109,000. So that's a lot of student debt to be saddled with. I also put together a little survey and sent it out to my email list. I asked the respondents who are artists to what degree they're able to make a living as a working artist. And I divided it into those with an MFA and those without. And as you can see from the graphs there really wasn't that much difference. Finally, I looked at the Pollock-Krasner grant recipients for 2009-2010. I've looked at a gazillion resumes. And out of the 75 that I looked at, 40 had MFAs, or 53%. So from all these statistics, and I think I'm just scratching the surface, I would love to see a bigger survey, I'm not seeing any distinct advantage or disadvantage to having an MFA, except at Gagosian, where I think it's a disadvantage. And now for the opinion part of my presentation. I mean, what are these schools teaching? I personally think there's an overemphasis on dialogue and an underemphasis on content. We're teaching artists to talk about art. Anything is art as long as you can justify it using the codified language of academia. As my friend Ted says, there's no good art, no bad art, just an endless dialogue about art. So finally, I want to quote New York Magazine art critic Jerry Saltz in a recent article about the Venice Biennale and what he calls Generation Blank. It's work stuck in a cul-de-sac of aesthetic regress, where everyone is deconstructing the same elements. A feedback loop is formed. Art is turned into a fixed shell game, moving the same pieces around a limited board. All this work is highly competent, extremely informed, and supremely cerebral. But it ends up part of some mannered international school of silly art. And I couldn't agree more with that, and I think the MFA programs have a lot to do with it.
I was going to be focused more on the statistics in this corner, but I thought I would not bore you to tears. Instead, I will just tell you that I obviously am touting the elitist position, and I am for education, for the aggrandizement of the institutions. This here in my hand is the data from Artworld. These are all the people who appeared on their covers since 1978. And from this, I then discovered which of these had MFAs. More or less, 42%. Now, remember, the earliest born person on the cover was Gustave Courbet, 1819. And the youngest one was actually the last one that appeared was Josh Smith from 1976. So I looked at whether it was an increase, and actually no. The actual yearly rate was around 40%, 40, 42. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit. But remember, all these samples, that these are MFAs as opposed to non-MFAs. The non-MFAs are part of the greater art world. Just think of how many artists there are in the world and what percentage of those people were on the covers. So it's overwhelmingly that more notice is paid to people who have the clout. And I know that we can disparage the debt. There is a little argument for that in hard times. It is nice to seek refuge at an academic institution while you mark time. Just remember where the MFA comes from. It has an incredible background. In the 50s, deeply influenced by the impact of Charles Olson's experiment at Black Mountain, Yale and Harvard implemented the new MFA studio art programs based on practice and critique. And I will just mention one last thing that Chris Krauss said. She taught at Art Center, some of you may know her. She said these were actually 2 years of institutionalized hazing.
I think that you were trying to make this point, Marlene, that half of them are MFAs and half of them are everything else. But the topic of our debate is the MFA necessary? And I think it's absolutely not. The resumes I looked at, lots of artists had a BFA, lots of artists who were doing well had BFAs. Lots of people had degrees in other things. There were a lot of architecture degrees, I noticed. A lot of people are self-taught. At Off-Ramp, I have one artist who has a PhD in policy analysis from the Rand Institute. And when she started doing artwork, she didn't want any part of academia. She wanted to do it on her own. I have a retired electrical engineer who just started painting in his old age. He's doing wonderful work. And I have another artist who has no degree at all. And he has a piece in the Museum of Art and Design right now as we speak on exhibition. So I think, it depends on what your goals, what your expectations are. Even if your goal is to be an art star, when I looked at the big three, Murakami, Damien Hirst, and Jeff Koons, not my favorite artists, but they are making boatloads of money, only one of them has an MFA, and that's Murakami. And he actually has a PhD, which they give in Japan, in some sort of traditional brushwork. Banksy, what's his name, Shepard Fairey. Neither of them has degrees. Fairey has a BFA in illustration. So again, I just don't see, where it's important to do it, unless it's a very personal thing that you need to do, and it's a very expensive thing to do.
My worthy opponent has made some excellent points, but I'm going to end by reading an email that I received from an artist in Texas. Actually, the email came from Germany. She's in her late 50s, she's a sculptor, and I was absolutely floored when I got it. Here it goes. I don't know if you know, I was accepted in a master's program I was able to register the day before I left for Germany. So I am getting credit for 2 classes here in Germany. Is it necessary for the social and political connections? Yes. For the friendships that will support one through the art career? Yes. For the ability to teach at a college level? Yes. For adding skills and giving a person more time to explore themselves to develop as an artist? Yes. Can it be done without it? Yes. Is it more difficult over a lifetime without it? Yes. It is one of those things that is difficult to put a dollar upon. However, having done it many years without this degree, I can see the benefits enough to do it at my age. I always did want an MFA, so here I go.
I sent out, I asked how many people, there were 300 people responded. I asked how many of them thought it was necessary to get an MFA, and 91% said they thought it wasn't necessary. To be fair, I asked how many thought it would be helpful, and that was about 75% said they thought it would be helpful. Then I asked for comments, and I got loads of comments and opinions. And one of the things that kept coming up for MFAs were the contacts that you make in art school. And I say you can make the contacts anywhere, and my stats show that even if you have those contacts, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. But there's so many other ways you can proceed in the art world, and there are other ways to make contacts. Go live at the brewery, get a job at an art gallery. It's all around you. I'm sorry? Read artillery, yes. Take workshops, take classes. An MFA doesn't give you an advantage in getting into commercial galleries or museums, making a living as an artist, or getting grants, according to my statistics. It's very expensive. It saddles you with student debt that you have very little chance of paying off by working as an artist. Save your money, live your life, read, travel, pay attention, learn to think for yourself, work hard, look inside, and make yourself the best artist that you can be.
Thank you, ladies. Now it's voting time. Who agrees with Marlene that you should have an MFA will help you immensely? All right, and for Jane, who believes you can survive without one?